If your dog's reactive and has been for a while, there's a good chance you're unknowingly making a couple of mistakes that are making things worse, maybe even undoing all of your progress. But here's the good news. The mistakes are easy to fix and the solutions are safe, effective, and simple to apply. After working with thousands of reactive dog owners, both online and in person, I spotted 3 common mistakes that almost everyone makes. And I guarantee you're doing at least 2 of them, if not all 3. But don't worry, I'm not here to just call you out. I'll show you exactly how to fix them so you can finally start seeing real progress and actually enjoy life with your dog again. First up, the reward loop and how to correct it. Corrections, one of the most controversial topics in dog training. Should you use them? Shouldn't you? When? Why? How? The debate never ends. But here's the reality. At some point, you probably will need to correct your dog, not to assert dominance, not to demand respect, and definitely not to intimidate them, never daring to move again. It's actually much simpler than that. A corrections job is to ensure that unwanted behavior, like reactivity, doesn't achieve its intended goal. What do I mean? Well, take your German Shepherd, for example. He's nervous. He's unsure about the other dog or man in the hat. So he barks, lunges, and puts on a show to make them go away. And most of the time, they do. And that's just how life works. People walk past and carry on about their day. But your dog doesn't understand that. He thinks that his barking and lunging made them leave. And that belief fuels the cycle of reactivity. And worse of all, it doesn't give him opportunity to realize the other dog or the man in the hat was never out to hurt him at all. And that's where a correction sometimes needs to come in. Not to intimidate, but to interrupt that cycle and make sure the behavior doesn't work the way your dog thinks it does. Now, some will tell you that all of this can be fixed with treats and frantic jazz hands. But if you've ever handled a real reactive dog in a real environment, you know that it's rarely that simple. But there is a catch. Corrections come with a major disclaimer, and instead of just telling you about it, I'd rather show you. So let's head outside.
So we're going to talk about corrections today with Lenny, and perhaps one of my biggest bugbears as a dog trainer is when a dog trainer tells you to put a piece of equipment on a dog or change how you communicate with a dog, expose him to their trigger, and then correct them when they react. What that may do is create what we call a superstition, where the dog doesn't understand the picture which we're trying to show them. In this instance, it would be Lenny might not understand that it's the barking, lunging, growling that gets him told off, and therefore he goes, oh, mum and dad tell me off when the trigger's here. Perhaps I experience some discomfort only when the trigger's here. And so it's imperative that a couple of things happen if we decide to use corrections in our training. Is one, that we prepare our dog to understand what a correction means, yes. And 2, we're not just trying to install rules in the presence of our dog's trigger. So it's really important that we're not just putting a leash on our dog, putting a collar on our dog, a slip lead, e-collar, whatever it needs to be, and then exposing them to the trigger and just saying, hey, you're not allowed to do that. We got that chance of creating that superstition, right? Imagine every time your new teacher walked into the room and you got poked into the side. Very quickly, the presence of that person, that triggering situation, becomes even more aversive, right? So there is a time and a place where our dog might do something where we need to stop them. We need to inhibit the behavior. We need to say, you can't continue down that path of success in that behavior. So let's say Lenny barks and lunges and growls at another dog in order to push them away, as I spoke about in the video just then, in order to push them away, and they do then go away. Well, that behavior is going to be reinforced. And no matter how much food and toys and play I throw into different alternative behaviors, he's going to just continue to go down that cycle of reinforcement as we've spoken about. Now, this is Lenny. He's a rescue dog. He has spent 1,000 days in kennels. He was a little bit frustrated over other dogs. We've worked through it, but I'm going to use him today for demonstrative purposes for a couple of reasons that we're going to talk about in later videos. Don't concentrate on what equipment I'm using just now. I'm going to talk about that in point number 3. All I want us to get an understanding of in this next bit is giving our dog the preparation for a correction. So we got a fundamental behavior, whether that's a loose lead walk, whether that's a place command, whether that's a recall, or whatever it needs to be. I will drop a link in the description of a video that's going to teach you all of those 3 things. So I'm not going to spend time doing that now. Lenny ultimately understands what a loose lead walk is, or has a basic understanding. So conceptually, I need to make sure that he understands that when he's in a behavior that I've already asked for, whether it's a close, e.g. loose lead, or I'm asking for the recall, or a place command, even when things draw his attention, he needs to stay in that command. So many times owners are asking for their dog to be obedient only in the presence of their trigger. So what they're doing is letting the dog drag them around everywhere. Then we're seeing the other dog, or then we're seeing a person. And then they're saying, hey, close, heel, leave it, leave it, leave it. And we're adding fuel to the fire there. We're probably just winding our dog up because of we've been inconsistent. Inconsistent feedback to our dog is going to induce frustration, and we probably make things worse. So our dog needs a comprehensive understanding. Again, I've dropped the video link below to make sure you can teach those behaviors, but we also need to understand what a correction is to our dog. All right, so first and foremost, when we want to start teaching an understanding of a correction or an aversive, it's an umbrella term I'm just going to use for a pressure to alter my dog's behavioral path. We want to make sure first that we're doing it with things that don't bring about nasty, not nice feelings to our dog. So if our dog's potentially scared of something, then yeah, sure, we're going to have to say, hey, you're not allowed to bark, lunge, growl at that something. I need you to calm down so you can realize that the other dog or the man in the jumper was never going to hurt you, and take it in. You can never re-socialize a dog whilst they're in this frenzied state of mind. It doesn't matter if your dog is reactive to 100 dogs. He's not going to suddenly get used to the 101st dog if he's reacted at 100 different dogs. We must create a different pathway. We must install a pattern interrupt and then start showing him to dogs. Okay, so we've got the motivation over our dog. We perhaps got a charge marker, perhaps taught a loose lead walk. We're concentrating on the right equipment, yada, yada, yada. But now we are talking about corrections. So Abbas, come and bring that ball over and just place it on the floor. It's a ball that Lenny likes. Put it on the floor there. Close. Good. Good. And I want to be able to walk past the ball and Lenny not go and get it. Good boy. Close. For the deference. But ultimately, conceptually, all I need you guys to take away is, if I throw food over there, close. Okay. I start fabricating distractions. I start giving my dog fake draws to replicate, to substitute their trigger. And I want to make sure my dog understands what a correction is. It means to come back into the behavior I've asked for, and it's just not contextless pops on the lead as we've realized is going to create maybe superstition or agitate our dog. We don't have to really think about the nitty-gritties right now. But what I want you to, at home, to make sure you're avoiding is only instilling rules and obedience when our dog is faced with their trigger, and not giving them an understanding of what a correction means. Close. And corrections take many different forms. Maybe it's a tap on the slip lead. Maybe it's a change of direction. Again, we don't need to focus on the nitty-gritties. All I need you to understand is our dog has the preparedness to turn off a correction. He knows what to do instead. And we practice that to begin with around emotionally positive draws. That might be toys. That might be grandma. That might be the front door. That might be the end of your driveway. It might be next to a busy park that your dog's anticipating going into a heightened state of driving. It's going to be the same for a down or a place command. If I go ahead and I drop food here, he should be able to stay in that. And it's not to tease the dog. It's not to try and trick the dog. It's to give him the preparedness for the real life situation when something potentially aversive may happen. He is prepared and understands how to turn off, remove the pressure, remove the correction. If we're not doing this and we're just throwing our dog into a difficult situation without giving them the conceptual understanding, you're very likely going to make things worse. Okay, so again, drop the video link below. That should explain a lot more. Watch this video, then go and watch that video, and everything should tie in nicely together for you. Another point I try to convey to owners as well is we want to make sure that we're offering that element of discipline, correction, obedience, whatever we want to call it. Let's not get too hung up on words, in a variety of different pictures. So when our dog gets things wrong, it is is their behavior that is corrected, and they're not just getting corrected because of different triggers are popping up. So what do I mean? I mean, I'm going to do it with a ball and grandma and everything else that we've spoken about to make sure Lenny understands that he's getting corrected for the common denominator, which is pulling on the lead. So we have to go through our corrections in a variety of different pictures to give our dog the opportunity to establish the common denominator, which should be their unwanted behavior, not, oh, I get corrected every time there's a man in a hat, or I get corrected every time I smell a certain dog, and so on and so forth, because we can create that superstition. So really important that some pressure is involved in the learning process, teaching process, and not just saved for, hey, I'm going to plow you with foods, and then when you get it wrong, I'm going to correct you. That's going to create all the issues that we've spoken about in this video so far. And if you can't even get your dog in this sort of state and they're too frenzied, they're too crazy, that they can't even concentrate, then hang about for mistake number 2, because that's going to help there too.
So, mistake number 2, the time trap. This mistake isn't just about what you train, but when you train. And it's often the reason your dog seems to explode with energy the second you walk out of your front door. There's 2 main principles we need to understand here. To encourage calmness or calm behavior, practice commands like place or loose lead walking, or your dog just observing other dogs after your dog has burned off some energy. And to boost excitement over things like play or recall, we want to practice those things after your dog's had a rest, e.g. first thing in the morning or right after a nap. Now, if your dog is already too amped up during walks, think about what they're doing right before you leave. If they've been lounging around the house for hours, they're basically a pressure cooker. The longer they're idle, the more tension builds. And the moment you release the valve by heading outside, all that pent-up energy blasts out as excitement or reactivity. Instead, let them blow off some steam before facing triggers. With a quick play session or a short training game, or even just a few sprints in the yard, not only does that ease build up the pressure, but the exercise also triggers the release of feel-good endorphins, helping them stay calmer when they finally do see the other dog. Let's head back outside with Lenny and see how this looks practically. Get up again.
So we've spoken about how we can accidentally reverse our dog's energy cycle to inadvertently make things worse. What do people do? They allow their dog to pent up in the house all day, waiting on your every move to reach for the lead, to reach for their harness, to get the food out, to get the poo bags, and then it elicits a lot of excitement. Then you're essentially taking a jack-in-a-box, a pressure cooker, out on a walk. So what I have my clients do online and in person is allow their dog, or give their dog, a means to express some energy, express some arousal, express some drive before we go out and do any exposure or socialization. So that means getting the toy, going into the garden or any space where it's going to be kind of sterile, and giving your dog a bit of a blowout through the means of play before you do your obedience, your loose lead work, your place work, or just your socialization around dogs. We like to create a little bit of separation from the play to the exposure to make sure our dog has time to bring their acute arousal down, bring their revs down, and then they should, like us, maybe after a gym session, after a decent run, if we've heard of the runner's high, we should then have our dog in a much more biddable state of mind when we're doing our exposure work, okay? So I'm gonna play with Len. I'm gonna link another video in the description to give you an idea of how you should be playing with your dog. But conceptually, all I want you to take from this is we're gonna play with Lenny, we're gonna gas him out, then we're going to practice some place work around other dogs. And we want to do it in that format. I don't want to bring him out of the van where he's buzzing and ready to go and ready to send that energy, that excitement, that arousal on anything that moves, right? It's what we do a lot of accidentally with our pet dogs. So don't worry about how I'm playing. You can watch that other video in a second. I'm going to quickly play with Len, then we'll do some work around dogs, and then I'll talk you through what we're doing and, more importantly, why. Boy. Good lad. Out. Yes. Good lad. Out. Yes. Good boy. Good boy. Good lad. Out. Get it. Good boy. Good boy. Yeah, good lad. Yes. Good boy. Get it. Good lad. Good boy. Yes. Good boy, lad. Good boy. So, just had a play session with Lenny there. It's really important I just give him a moment to bring himself back down. All right, arousal accumulates throughout the day typically, so we don't want it to be all play. Short play session, take the edge off him, take the beans out of him, you know, subside him a little bit. This isn't a forever thing. While we're trying to condition new equipment, which we'll talk about in the next mistake video, and while we're conditioning new responses to stimuli, whether that's dogs, cats, birds, or squirrels, want to make sure our dog is in that calm down phase, especially if I'm doing really low arousal work, like place work. Don't worry about the leash and collar or toy just yet. I'm going to talk about the leash and collar in the next clip. Fulfillment before exposure. So they don't try and achieve fulfillment via their triggers. They don't try and express their defensive drive via triggers, by barking at triggers. They don't try and express their prey drive by chasing other dogs, okay? Because there's big, high energy dogs like Lenny, like Stark, or like your cockapoo at home, Lisa, is gonna get you in trouble, right? So he's come down, look, right? I finished the game, he's down here. We're ready to do some place work. Link in the description for a video on how to do that, and it'll pop up at the end of this video, so don't worry about that, teaching that just yet. But I'm gonna get a couple of dogs out that might excite Lenny, might trigger Lenny, and then we're going to work through that. I want to just demonstrate that Lenny's going to be in a much more biddable, susceptible state of mind after he's had that bit of an outlet. Do we have to do it forever? No. But whilst we're trying to create acute behavioural change in our dog, potentially. Play's a great one. Got videos on how to best play with your dog, link in the description. I'll also put a workshop on play I did with Athena, the high drive Dutch Shepherd. There's a link for that in the description too. Spoiling you today. On to place work. So, place, down, good boy. Good. Okay, so now we're gonna go get Abbas to get a couple of his dogs out. Pepper Potts, if you remember Pepper Potts, she's gonna come out and they're gonna do a little bit of food work down there while Lenny learns how to be calm. If he was bottled up at this moment and he had like all that pent up energy, so he'd just come out of the van or just come out of the crate or just out of a nap, of 3-hour nap in the living room, chances are I'd be wrestling a lot with him, trying to keep him in the down. He's gonna be staring at the dog. He's gonna be like, let me at them, and he's potentially gonna become even more sensitive to the presence of other dogs, okay? So important that we're just instilling good habits early doors, whether that's with a puppy or whether that's with an older rescue dog like Lenny. Good. And while I've got you, I'm using my duration marker. That could either be good or the command itself, is what we typically use. If he breaks in anticipation, I want to correct that and put him back into the down. Yes. If I use my yes marker, that should elicit him to move. The reason we have two different markers is we typically use good or our duration marker to stay in the command, and I'm going to come to you and deliver room service. That's going to create stability in the command, and I want him to remain down here. I don't want him in anticipation of play right now. I don't want him in anticipation of a big YES and to pop off and loads of excitement. We're doing exposure work now. We're either going to do loose lead walk in, little baby recalls perhaps, or place work. You don't need one of these beds. You can condition it at home on a bath mat and then take the bath mat out with you. How to teach these commands and how to strengthen, solidify these commands are all available to you somewhere else on our channel. I'll link them in the description. Finish this video, then move on to the others. So we got Abbas bringing his dog out here. Now, if Lenny gets off the bed, he understands the concept of a correction because we've proved that around emotionally positive distractions and draws. So it's not like he's going to get off the bed to interact with that dog and I say, hey, you're not allowed to. I'm not going to fall into the trap of building a superstition that that dog is bad, because I've told him in other contexts, hey, getting off the bed is bad when I say you need to stay on the bed. And secondly, he's down here. He's down at a gear 1, maybe even parked. Makes it a lot easier for me to keep him down there after he's just had the gears 5, gears 4. A little bit of a break to allow him to come down, then we do our exposure work. Good. And I'm going to use a lot of goods. I want to stabilize him on this bed and learn that being on the bed is good, being on the bed is chilled, and over time, I'm going to desensitize him to the presence of other dogs potentially being excited. Because if while he's at a 0, low arousal exposure to other dogs, that's where he's going to start really achieving that, hey, I don't care about other dogs. It's a dog, so what? It's no big deal. Conversely, the opposite would be putting our dog in a heightened reactive state, exposing them to a lot of dogs. You expose them to 100 dogs, well, they're sensitive to it, they're staring at it, they're reacting to it, or they're in a really like frenzied state of mind. They're going to become more sensitive to other dogs. And the 101st dog, my dog is just as likely to react to that one as he was the second one, third one, so on and so forth. Good. So while these guys are having fun over here, Lenny's like, oh, it's none of my business. I need to stay on the bed. And the aim of the game for a reactive dog is for other dogs to become background music. We need to be at the forefront of their mind, doing something, giving our dog something important to do, whether that's place, whether it's loose lead walking, whether it's recall, whilst this other dog is in the background. Foreground, background. And I know that's literally the case in this video right now, but metaphorically we want to take that away as well. Background music is just happening over there whilst I'm doing my thing, and over time we can get closer. This dog can be more intense. Maybe we graduate from a Dutch Shepherd concentrating on her dad to a barky Labrador or a big German Shepherd that might be a bit barky. And it's just about giving our dog behaviors, setting them up for success by making sure we're introducing those behaviors at the correct part of the day, and then slowly but gradually exposing our dog to other dogs or whatever their trigger needs to be in a way that they can tolerate it. And we're starting to see Lenny get really relaxed. Good. And so we make sure we use our good command so Lenny's able to keep himself really low. You notice his hips are tilted there, right? Good. And because he anticipates that I'm coming to him and he doesn't need to move, that shouldn't create a shift in his arousal. Whereas if I was using lots of why yeses and yeses, then he might anticipate getting off the bed, coming to me, being reinforced by the release, the movement and the food, and that's going to create a counterintuitive mindset for this activity.
And finally, mistake number 3, the poisoned collar. This next point might ruffle a few feathers, but I'm here to share the truth, not win a popularity contest. The bottom line is the equipment you're using may be poisoned. Let me explain with a personal example. I have these trusty old work pants that I've worn every morning for years. The routine is always the same. Put on pants, make a strong coffee, and head out to start my day. Eventually, those pants become more than just clothing. They became a cue for my brain and body to wake up and get to work. They're so locked into that routine, I could never use them as pajamas. Your dog's harness or collar can become the same kind of cue, but instead of time to go to work, it might be time to pull, bark, and lunge. Over countless walks, your dog's gear has become associated with reactivity. Now, you could try and fix that association, but if it's deeply ingrained, it might be easier and more effective to simply switch to a different piece of equipment. Just like my work pants will never feel like pajamas, there's a good chance your dog's harness will never become a cue for calm walking. And that's where the controversy comes in, because of some people believe that any equipment can be rehabilitated. But if your dog has developed a rock solid habit with that harness or collar, you might need to scrap it all together and start fresh with a new cue. So let's head back out to Lenny and see how that looks in real terms.
As I've just mentioned, we've talked about how we can have poison pieces of equipment. So I want to demonstrate something in a second where, okay, I put Lenny onto his flat collar, and what he's going to do is feel really comfortable pulling into it. Look how easy it is for him. It creates then a lot of conflict in the conversation between Lenny and I. And for the eagle-eyed of you, I've actually been using a prong collar or pinch collar. Now, I know that some of you might see this collar and think that is, that is a medieval torture device. It looks barbaric, but I'm here to argue the prong collar's corner. So we've got a harness which does not cause a dog to pull, makes it easier for a dog to pull. They've been used on huskies for hundreds of years, maybe not hundreds, but a long time. And they've been used for dogs that traditionally want to pull. We've got all different types of harnesses, from front clip to ones that kind of constrict on the dog. They're designed to use discomfort to change the dog's behavior. Arguably so is the prong collar, okay? We've got slip collars that are gonna sit high on the dog when I don't typically have a problem with them. Allows us good control of the dog's head. However, there's gonna create an element of restriction on the dog because they have to be tight to sit in the right spot. We've got the flat collar. What the flat collar is going to do, if we try and walk our dog on the flat collar, is going to create enough discomfort where the dog wants to fight it. And if we're not really good and we don't have a really good reward system, which many owners don't, then very quickly we poison that. And we can then try and fix things up, as I've just spoke about in that previous video there, or we can just create a new piece of equipment. And so we have to weigh all of these things up to think which is the best piece of equipment for our dog. And why I use prong collars on my own dogs and the dogs that I am fostering, with an exception to the sausage dogs, is because it allows me to adjust my dog's behavior with the least amount of pressure. And when I am working Lenny on it, it allows for the least amount of conflict. Whereas I see people essentially arguing with their dog, walking down the street, wrestling them with a flat collar, wrestling them with the harness. And for me, that's not good for your relationship with the dog. Teaching a dog through opposition reflex that they're probably better off indulging and investing themselves into the environment. Prong collar, it doesn't have to be on super tight to be effective. So we're not going to have any sort of asphyxiation. We have to use the least amount of pressure compared to any other tool, arguably not the e-collar, but we're not going to talk about that today. So it's going to protect our dog's trachea. You might have seen pictures of prong collar injuries and things like that. They're either from not a prong collar at all, and one of those spiky collars with the spikes on the neck that's been inverted, or a prong collar that's been left on the dog for weeks, months on end, which of course we're never going to do, so the dog grows into it, or a prong collar, unfortunately, that might have been sharpened. The ends of this prong collar are blunt. They are not sharpened. They create multiple points of constriction that, once the lead is tight, obviously tighten up, and then once the lead loosens up again, that relaxes instantly. People will argue that they will induce pain, fear, and kill your relationship with the dog and intimidate them, but I would just like to prove a point. I'm going to play with Lenny in his prong collar, as you've seen me do in the previous video, and I want to assure you that a dog cannot stay in a jovial, playful state and be scared at the same time. They're incompatible. They can't happen at the same time. If Lenny was scared of the prong collar right now, there's no chance he's going to play with me. Okay? So I'm going to bust the toy out. We're going to see what he does. Yes. Good lad. Good lad. Out. Yes. Good lad. And do you think because I've used this tool, our relationship is being damaged? Is he less likely to engage with me? Get it? Good boy. Good lad. Does he look scared of me? Does he look shut down? Does he have learned helplessness? None of the above, because it's been conditioned. It is fitted correctly. It's been associated with reinforcement. And just like everything else we've spoken about in this video, it's been applied at the right time, or the dog's in the right frame of mind. Good boy. Whoa. Get it? Good boy. Good boy. Good boy. Drop. Good. Get it? He has the conceptual understanding of a correction. He knows what they're for. He knows they're not just in the presence of triggers, and so on and so forth. Ask me 5 years ago, would I ever put a prong collar on my dog? I would say absolutely not, and I think you're an animal abuser for even thinking about it. But learning more, seeing it used more, and ultimately seeing what it can do for big, strong dogs, small dogs, I've seen them on Daxies, I've seen them on Cockapoos, and to enable that dog to have more freedom, be more disciplined, and enjoy a more fulfilled life because of they're safer for their owners, themselves, and everyone else around them. Dogs like Lenny here, I would continuously try and argue for them in that instance. Now, the reason I formatted this video in the way in which we have today, point number one, we don't just slap a tool on the dog and start correcting them in the presence of the trigger. You will make things worse. And all the adverse arguments against the prong collar probably are reasonable arguments in that context. If we are applying them at the wrong time, when the dog's in the wrong state of mind, we've not done any teaching of the dog. So go ahead, watch the videos that I've linked in the description. We can start conditioning behaviors via maybe a slip lead. And then when we need to think about corrections, and later on down the line, then when we need to think about adding the next step of obedience with our dog, a prong collar is a reasonable tool so long as we are following the right direction in conditioning them, associating them with reinforcement, and not creating those nasty superstitions. Some will argue that you can achieve all the same things with positive reinforcement. They will cite papers, they will cite studies. I've been around long enough, I've seen them all. The science on dog training is so weak that in any other industry, they wouldn't even get a look in, they would not be approved. So don't come at me with wishy-washy scientific papers. I'm not gonna reply to you because if they do not stand, okay? They mean nothing. because of not one of them are conclusive that positive reinforcement is more effective than, let's say, balanced methods. And do we ever use just a prong collar? Do we ever use, you look at any one of my videos, just an e-collar? Absolutely not. We use them with reinforcement, we use them with play. And here's a nice example of how a dog can be wearing a tool, be totally engaged with his handler, be totally motivated to want to interact with his handler, but it's there for things like drop, ensuring the drop, which we're still teaching Lenny. Get it? And also for the obedience you've seen in these videos. Sometimes your dog is going to want to do other things that are more valuable than your behaviors, the reinforcement you have. And that's okay. You're not a bad owner. You've not failed them. You don't lack skill. Sometimes that's just how things are. And sometimes we have to use a bit of pressure to balance out the cost-benefit analysis that our dog is going to make. E.g., he might prefer to run and bark at Pepper Potts than he does stay on his bed. And at that point, I have to say, hey, or create a history at least of saying, hey, no, you have to stay on your bed. You'll get good things when you stay there. We're not allowed to do that right now. And it becomes a big part of the picture of how we start thinking about changing our dog's behavioral pathways.
If you've made it this far, thank you for sticking with me. And as always, like and share and all of that, because of ultimately that pushes this information out to more people. And that's why we're here, to cut through the fluff, skip the nonsense, and give you more practical advice and techniques that will genuinely improve life for you and your dog. And if you've enjoyed this video, check out this one right here.